For nearly 20 years, Bernie Madoff had a secret. Thousands of people believed he was one of the greatest investors on Wall Street. Banks trusted him, millionaires trusted him, celebrities trusted him, and some investors were willing to do almost anything just to give him their money. There was only one problem. Bernie Madoff wasn't actually making the money. The billions shown on his clients' accounts weren't sitting in some incredible investment portfolio. Much of that money wasn't there at all. And when the global financial crisis hit in 2008, Madoff suddenly faced a problem he couldn't hide from. Everyone wanted their money back. And that's when one of the biggest financial frauds in history finally began to collapse. But how did one man convince thousands of people to trust him for decades? And how did almost nobody stop him? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. Bernie Madoff grew up in New York and entered the financial world in the 1960s. He didn't start with billions. He started small. But over the years, he built his own brokerage firm and slowly developed a reputation as a successful and respected businessman. His company became an important part of the financial world. And Madoff himself eventually became chairman of NASDAQ, one of the world's most important stock exchanges. That reputation changed everything. Madoff wasn't just another guy promising people they could get rich. He looked legitimate. He had the offices. He had the connections. He had the experience. And most importantly, he had the trust of people who were already wealthy. Soon, investors began handing him enormous amounts of money, and the results looked almost too good to be true. Year after year, their accounts appeared to grow. Even when the markets were struggling, Madoff seemed to keep producing steady returns. For investors, it looked like he had figured out something everyone else had missed. But there was a problem, a massive one. The investments weren't generating the returns Madoff claimed. Instead, he was running what is known as a Ponzi scheme. The basic idea was surprisingly simple. New investors put money into the system. That money could then be used to pay investors who wanted to withdraw their supposed profits. The statements showed successful investments. The numbers looked real. But behind the scenes, the system depended on new money constantly coming in. As long as investors kept depositing money and relatively few people asked for it back, the illusion could survive. And somehow, Madoff kept that illusion alive for years. Then came 2008. The global financial crisis was spreading across the world. Stock markets were crashing. Banks were collapsing, and investors were becoming terrified. Suddenly, people didn't want to leave their money sitting in investments. They wanted cash. Billions of dollars in withdrawal requests began piling up, and Madoff had a problem. He didn't have the money. There was no secret portfolio worth billions waiting to be sold. The incredible returns his investors had been seeing were based on fake records. The entire system depended on trust. And now that trust was disappearing? According to later accounts, Madoff eventually told members of his family what was happening. The truth was finally coming out. The investment empire that had taken decades to build was collapsing in a matter of days. In December 2008, Bernie Madoff was arrested. The man who had once been treated as a financial genius was suddenly at the center of one of the biggest fraud investigations in American history. And the numbers were unbelievable. You will often hear that Madoff's scheme was worth around $65 billion. But there's an important detail. That number represented the value shown on fake account statements, including supposed investment profits. It wasn't $65 billion sitting in Madoff's personal bank account. The actual amount of money lost was much lower, but it was still enormous. Thousands of investors lost billions of dollars. Some had invested their life savings. Others had trusted Madoff with money meant for retirement, charities, businesses, and their families. And the damage didn't stop with the people who personally knew Madoff. Entire networks of investors had been built around him. People trusted him because their friends trusted him. Their friends trusted him because financial professionals trusted him. And financial professionals trusted him because Madoff had spent decades building an almost perfect reputation. But there were warning signs. Some people questioned how Madoff could produce such consistent returns. Others wondered why his strategy was so difficult to understand. One analyst even raised serious concerns about Madoff's operation years before the collapse. But the warnings never became powerful enough to destroy his reputation. And that's one of the most fascinating parts of the story. Madoff didn't need everyone to believe him. He only needed enough people to believe him. Every new investor helped strengthen the illusion. Every successful withdrawal made the operation look legitimate. And every person who recommended Madoff to someone else became part of the system without necessarily knowing it. That's what made the fraud so difficult to see. It wasn't built overnight. It was built slowly, year after year, trust after trust, until the illusion became bigger than the truth. In 2009, Bernie Madoff pleaded guilty to multiple federal crimes. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison. The man who had spent decades building an image of success would spend the rest of his life behind bars. But perhaps the most important lesson from the Madoff scandal isn't simply how much money disappeared. It's how powerful reputation can be. Madoff understood something that every successful con artist understands. People don't just invest their money. They invest their trust. And once enough people believe something is real, questioning it becomes much harder. For decades, Bernie Madoff appeared to have everything: money, power, respect, connections. But underneath all of it was an illusion. And eventually, that illusion met the one thing it couldn't survive: reality. When everyone wanted their money back, the system stopped working. The numbers stopped making sense. The secret was exposed. And one of Wall Street's most respected figures became one of the most infamous financial criminals in modern history. Bernie Madoff had spent decades convincing the world that he had discovered the secret to making money. In the end, his real secret was much simpler. He wasn't creating wealth. He was creating the illusion of it. And, for almost 2 decades, the world believed him.